Oh, most gracious and loving God, once again we're here to worship and praise your name, but to also open our hearts and minds and to listen to the message that you have placed upon us this day. We ask that you do this through your humble servant, we pray. Amen. There's so many things that I thought of with the passage from Ecclesiastes. And I have a whole bunch of different notes. And then there's this passage from the Gospel of Luke that I chose that talks about a man who had so much. He had so much he didn't know what to do with all of it. And so what did he do? He said, well, I have so much to do, have so much more. So what am I going to do? I'm going to tear down what I have. I'm going to build their storage facilities to keep all the abundance that I have. And of course God said, no, that's not the way it should be. We talk about, last week, we talked about the letting go of our clutter, of maybe going through our closets and letting go of maybe doing some spring cleaning, getting rid of all the extra things that do we really need. And here's a man who maybe had an overabundance of gifts. Think of it not just as grain, but think of it as all the gifts that he had. And all he decided to do was just keep it for himself, instead of giving it and sharing it with others. And we talk about, do we build up treasures for ourselves here on this earth, or are we building up treasures for heaven? This passage that I read from Ecclesiastes, for everything there's a time for every matter and purpose under heaven, time to be born, a time to die. And we are in a season of life, in our journey of life, and through our life we are also on a journey of faith. And each and every year we live through the seasons, especially up here in upstate New York or northern New York, whatever we call this part of New York State. Because we do experience 4 seasons. Sometimes we only say we have winter and summer and maybe a little bit of fall. But truly, we actually do have 4 seasons. Just in case you didn't know, there is a spring that happens each and every year. And so we see and experience what the seasons outside us do, right? We've experienced the cold winter. We experienced the snow. We experienced those dark nights. Those long, bitter days. I shouldn't say long, bitter days because it's short days during that time frame because it's longer nights. But we experience that, and that's a time of kind of quietness in some respects, because what is the earth doing at that time? There's a lot of things happening underneath the ground, right? Underneath the snow. But a lot of things go dormant during the winter, right? What do bears do in the wintertime? They hibernate, right? Squirrels store up tons and tons of nuts. And boy, were there a lot of acorns this last year. They had an overabundance of acorns. So there's a lot of things that seem to be dormant in the wintertime. Things that we can't necessarily see. But then the spring starts to come. And that's a time of resurrection for us, isn't it? Because we see things coming to life each and every day. We start seeing buds starting to form on the trees and on the bushes and shrubs and flowers starting to bloom. And when you start seeing the tulips and the daffodils, those are usually the first things that come to light that you see. That's about the only names of flowers I know besides lilacs and a couple others. But anyway, you start to see those, and it's like, And then all of a sudden there's people outside walking, right? The weather's nice. All of a sudden, oh, where's everybody been? We all stayed inside our nice warm homes because it was cold outside. So now the weather's getting nicer. You see people outdoors. You see people doing things and helping tend to the soil and planting seeds and helping things start to grow. And then in the summertime, a lot of us take some time off because we all need it, let's face it. We take vacations, and we have some beautiful places all around us where we can go, like the Adirondacks. We have places that we can go for rest and renewal. And the summer's when everything comes to fruition, right? Starts to, we get the raspberries, the strawberries, the blueberries. We get a lot of those things coming to life, things that we can enjoy to eat during the summertime. And then the fall is another season that changes once again. We see a whole new landscape of colors throughout the trees and leaves, right? And we also harvest those things that haven't been harvested in the summer. The harvest has come. And once the harvest has come, we start to see things die once again. The leaves turn brown, they fall to the ground. But then all those things that start to decompose in the ground help produce fertile soil for the next year. And so we begin over and over and over again. So too do we have cycles in our lives, seasons in our lives. When we first are born, we're just a little cute, cuddly thing, like it's Bella back there, and we have Aria back there. They are helpless without somebody tending and taking care of them, right? And then they get a little bit older and they start learning to walk. They stand and they start walking. And we see Ben becoming a little boy now, no longer looking like a little baby anymore. He's starting to look like a little boy. So they go into that toddler phase, and then they really start learning to speak, and they walk. And then all of a sudden they go off to school, right? And then they start learning new things. And then as they get older, they learn even more things, and you get more homework, and you get more papers to write. And throughout all that time, they're also learning about God. Maybe when they're little, they just hear some of the stories. And then they start learning a little bit more. They start being able to read the scriptures. And hopefully they are being taught through their families and through Sunday school and through confirmation. And then they get to a point where they start to affirm their own faith. Because now they're old enough to have a better understanding of who God is and what God is doing in relationship with them. And as we get older, we get through high school, some of us go to work, some of us go on to college, maybe we even go on to graduate school after that. Some of us get married and we have kids. Some of us stay single. Some of us get married to our work and live for our work, and we kind of lose sight of things. Some of us become grandparents, and we get to nurture little ones all over again. And throughout all this, we are experiencing different seasons in our life and in our faith. And hopefully, as we understand these seasons, we also understand how those rhythms affect us, not only mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Because as we get older, let's face it, our bodies don't do everything we want them to do when we were 15 or 16 years old, right? And sometimes our mind isn't as sharp as what we want it to be anymore. And sometimes we go through some really difficult crises in our lives. Or we have to say goodbye to some of our loved ones as they age. Or they get sick and then they die. We need to understand that it's all part of our circle of life. It's all part of who we are. And for everything that we see, for everything there's a season, we need to understand that as we grasp our seasons, we need to make sure that we find the balance each and every day in our lives. If we're so married to our work and we let work define who we are, and all we do is work, 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 and don't take time for some joy or for some downtime, are we really taking care of ourselves? If we play all day, which I'd like to do, like be like Peter Pan and live in Never Never Land and never grow up, and just have fun all the time, that would be awesome. But that's not real life, is it? I mean, we actually do grow up, we do get older. And so there are different responsibilities that get put on us. So we can have the joy, we can have the fun, but we also need to balance it once again. And if we have an overabundance of gifts, or if we have even just one gift that God has given us, it's not for ours to keep. It's for us to share. So how do we, in this technological world, when we are all texting and looking at our smartphones every few seconds, how do we embrace and still experience the seasons, the rhythm of life, the circle of life, if we can't open our eyes to it, if we can't hold it to ourselves, to our heart? How do we understand that even in every bit of our circle, every step that we take, God is with us through all of that? But if we lose sight of all that, are we lost? Are we so overconsumed with everything else that we've lost sight of being in relationship with one another? What if we realize that even with our technology and our smartphones and all the stuff we do through social media, we find ways of making connections with others in a positive way, connections with others that can share the gifts that we have to offer for people who are in need, for people who don't know God, for people who may have walked away from their faith. How do we make those connections? How do we find our rhythm of life, our rhythm of faith, our journey of life, our journey of faith? How do we embrace that as we open ourselves to the seasons of life and the seasons that we experience in our world? When we know there's devastation, we heard there's storms, there are, hail, size of baseballs in Oklahoma. We saw fires. We see so many different things happen in our world. And yet, we are people of faith who are struggling through those different storms. I have a book here that I want to share something with. I'd love to share the entire book with you because it's all about the circle of life. And there's also, I thought about the Circle of Life song, from The Lion King, which is also really powerful in many ways. And there's also a song from the Rent, which talks about the minutes for a year. How do we live one life? It's 525,600 minutes in a year. 525,600 minutes. So how do you measure a year? How do you measure your life in a year's time? And so often when I've done some funerals and everything, we talk about the dash. Not the date that you were born or the date that you died, but the dash that's in between. When you see that on a stone, a memorial stone, tombstone, it's the dash that's the important part, right? It's the dash of how we live our lives. So we have these 4 seasons in our lives. We have the spring, that is a season of resurrection. We have the season of summer, which is, excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. We have the season of summer, which is one of joy and fruitfulness. We have the season of autumn, which is a season of harvest. And we have the season of winter, which is a time of stillness and discernment and quietness. So for everything, there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. So sometimes when I was talking about the storms and the seasons, we know that some of these storms are fierce. We know that there's the floods, the tornadoes, the hurricanes, blizzards, all those things that we are mesmerized when we watch it on TV, right? We see what's happening and we are concerned, but we're so mesmerized by what's happening. And we can find some of those storms that can cause us not only a lot of anxiety and concern, but they scare us. And then there's storms in our own lives. There's storms that come on unexpectedly when you have a diagnosis of something you weren't expecting that could change your life forever. Whether it be an illness or there was a terrible accident that happened with somebody that you loved, something that can totally change how things are going in your life. And then sometimes marriages fail. And all of a sudden there may be a splitting of two who loved each other at one time. All these things may take time to rebuild. And sometimes it's an easy rebuild of getting through a particular storm, and sometimes those storms last a lifetime. But those storms can teach us so many things. And even whether it's the severe weather or whether it's some other personal storm in our life, in the middle of that is God. And if we can hold fast to our faith, if we can continue to grow in our faith through all these seasons, through all these storms, so that by the time our journey ends, we are so strong in our faith Jesus will meet us face to face when the time has come. I don't know what season you're in right now. You may actually be in the season of spring with the resurrection, where you're starting to experience new life and new things. Or maybe you're still in the season of winter in your lives. Whatever season you're in, remember that there's another season coming. Remember that there's always new life. There's always change. Every season produces more change. And we are always changing in our lives. And I'd like to think we're always growing. Growing in our life, growing in our faith. May it be so.